Hi, it's Stuart here. Today I want to talk about a topic that's probably not particularly exciting or sexy, but it's one that's really important and vital to the future prosperity of your agency. And that's how to stop stuff going wrong. Or, if I use a more professional way of saying it, how to mitigate the risks in your agency. Now there's loads of risks and loads of things that could potentially derail the agency and knock it off course. Over the last 6 months, I've seen 4 particular scenarios that I think are really impactful and have had significant impacts on an agency's performance. Whether they've completely derailed them or not, they've involved a lot of input and a lot of time and money to sort them out and put them right. And some of them could have been headed off or avoided right from the beginning. So let's dive right in and let's look at those 4 key risk areas. First one to talk about is what would happen if a client who was really important, spending a lot of money with the agency, either cut back on their spending or even worse, left the agency and went somewhere else. Something that can happen even through no fault of your own. You could have really looked after the client very well, yet still, for whatever reason, for reasons beyond your control, they've cut him back or they're going to another agency. How can you mitigate against that happening? Well, you can obviously mitigate against it happening by offering great customer service, but you still can't prevent it happening completely. So what else can you do to mitigate the impact of it happening? The first thing you can do is you could make a strategic decision that you're not going to take on a client that takes up more than 20 to 25% of your total revenue. Why 20 to 25%? Well, most agencies make somewhere between 15 and 25% net profit. So if you lost one client who was spending that amount with you, then it would be significant to the agency. You'd probably have to make some realignments and some adjustments. However, it wouldn't completely derail the agency and it wouldn't chuck you off course and you'd end up losing the whole thing. So that's the first thing you could do, is make that strategic decision. If you've already got clients who are contributing more than 20 to 25%, or if you take on a client who's contributing more than that amount and decide to do it because it's too good to turn down, then please don't stop the new business efforts. Keep going with those new business efforts to try and bring on more customers that will then spread that impact out and reduce that big client's total impact on your P&L down a little bit. So that's one way of mitigating it. The second thing that I've seen really good agencies do, and agencies that are on the ball do, is every month they reforecast their income. So they have a monthly rolling forecast of what their income's going to look like, and they put in all the new client wins, client projects, and they take out anything where they've lost clients. Now that again doesn't mitigate the risk of the client leaving, but what it does is it's planning out the scenario that they currently know, and it's planning out exactly what the revenue is going to look like, and can they see any pinch points coming up in the future. So we then stick that into the cash flow forecast and a rolling P&L forecast, and if there are any pinch points that are coming up, they've identified them early and can make actions around it. Then if a client leaves and they need to readjust that forecast down, they can see what the impact on those vital points are. You know, are we going to run out of cash in 3 months' time when the corporation tax is due, for example? What we're going to do now to mitigate that rather than panicking about it on due date. So for a client leaving, I think they're 2 really good ways to help mitigate the loss, or at least plan around it so it doesn't have such a devastating effect on the agency. The second one is, what would you do if a key member of the team handed their resignation in and left? Well, if they're going to do that, they're going to do that. There's nothing you can do to stop them. However, what you can do is to make sure that you've got all the processes, all the procedures in your agency well documented and shared amongst the entire team, so there's nothing in the employee's head, it's all written down, which makes the handover of clients easier. If you can double up and make sure that every client is served by more than one person. And by doing that, you've got knowledge of that client shared across multiple people within your agency. You could create sets of really good client meeting notes, and now we've got these AI note takers like Fireflies and Otter. It makes note taking for meetings even easier. Store those notes somewhere central like the CRM system, and then everybody's got access to those notes across the agency going forward. So the third one, and probably actually the second most common after a client leaving that I've seen, is shareholder/director disputes. So this is where maybe two of you are running a business and you have a fallout. Now, I've heard many times over the years, I'm in business with my best mate, we're never gonna fall out. And yet, I've heard many times over the years how many times directors and shareholders do fall out. It's like any relationship, things happen, there are bumps in the road. Now, the majority of those bumps you sort out between you can sort out amicably and you can move on. But what happens if something comes along that's bigger than that, something that fundamentally breaks the relationship between two of you? How do you resolve that issue? Well, for me, every single agency owner should have protection in the shape of a shareholders agreement. Now, a shareholders agreement sets out the rules for what happens if there are disputes between directors and shareholders. It'll also set out what happens if somebody's ill or can't perform the duties. It sets out lots of rules for how different conflicts are resolved. I appreciate they cost money. I appreciate you'd hope that they never come out of a drawer. A bit like an insurance policy, it's there in the drawer, in the file, and saved, and you hope it never sees the light of day. But believe me, the number of times that we've seen a dispute and there hasn't been a shareholders agreement in place, it causes so much more trouble, so much more derailment to the operations of the agency than when you do have a shareholders agreement in place. So please spend the money, get a decent lawyer to draft one up for you and get it done. And the final situation that I've seen happen in the last few months is when either a key member of the team or a director is off ill on long-term sick. So I'm talking like 12 months plus now. What happens then? How do you mitigate against that? Well, first of all, again, if it's a director/shareholder, there are things that you can put in your shareholders agreement that will cover what to do if one of you is off long-term sick. But the second thing you can do to back it up and make sure that the business isn't financially compromised as a result of the illness is to get a form of key man insurance that pays out to the business to replace the person who's off on long-term sick. So that is a really good way of making sure that the business isn't financially compromised. Of course, somebody being off long-term sick has lots of other issues, and you might want to make sure you've got all the processes and procedures written and documented in the same way as you would to mitigate the risk for an employee leaving. But key man insurance and shareholders protection, really good things to have in place to mitigate against long-term illness. Now, many years ago, I used to work in the corporate sector, and we used to spend a long time every year identifying all the risks to our business and what we were going to do to mitigate them. There were some risks that felt at the time when you write them down, they were so far-fetched they were never going to come true, and thankfully none of them did. But we went to that extreme just to make sure that the business had that level of protection. We even had another office building in another town, just in case our building burnt down or we couldn't access it for whatever reason one day. And we used to, every year, we'd go over to the new building and we'd stress test that the backup procedures worked, that we could get onto the PCs, we could get onto the right network. All that sort of stuff was rigorously tested every single year. Now, I appreciate as small businesses, we're not going to have second sites. We're not going to perhaps go to the same lengths as a corporate would, but sitting down for a couple of hours, a couple of times a year, listing out those issues and those challenges and those risks to the business, and then making sure that wherever we can, we've got as many mitigating strategies in place to reduce that financial impact. Don't forget, there's a financial impact. There's also an impact of time, effort, brain space, distraction from core agency activities, the impact on the team, shareholder fallouts, can create a pretty toxic environment in the office. All that sort of stuff is taken care of. If anybody wants any help getting started on this journey of mitigating risks or wants to talk about it any further, just drop me a message and I'll be happy to talk about it. Speak soon.